Recording the time worked by an employee can be done in timesheets or directly on a pay run. Either way, a pay run must be created in order to pay the employees. There are a few preferences that can be set that affect the data entry on this screen, so I do encourage you to watch the video on payroll preferences for those. To get to the Pay Employees screen, we're going to go to Processes and Pay Employees, and if you happen to be integrated with one of our accounting software products, you'll go to Processes, Payroll, Pay Employees. When I get to this screen, I might see a list of different pay runs already on the screen. What you see on the screen is determined by the filter. You can see that mine is set in using a default filter. I could click on the down arrow and I could choose no filter, and that's going to bring back a bunch of older posted pay runs that I have. Okay, so that top one was open and these were posted. My filter was filtering out the posted. I'm going to go back to my default filter. If you want to change your default filter, or if you just want to change a temporary filter, you can go to the Filter tab. And right now you can see that mine is filtering the payrolls that only have the status of open, processed, or totals. And those are the ones that we're seeing on the front screen. If I also want to include posted, I can double click on it and I'll move it over to the right. Then I can say change the filter and click apply, and now it's also showing the posted. But this also includes posted from last year and any other previous year that I might have. So if I only wanted the posted pay runs from this year, I could add to the filter by going back to the filter, choosing a different filter item on the left. This time I'm going to filter for pay date, and I want the pay dates that were for this year. I'm going to add that to the filter and click apply again. And now I'm only seeing those that have a pay date that are in my current year. If I want to have that be my default filter from now on, I need to save it. Otherwise, when I close this screen and come back, it goes back to my other previous default filter. So to save it as my default filter, I would go to Filters and say Save as Default Filter. You can sort the pay runs that you see on the screen by any of the columns that are visible. So if I wanted to sort it by payroll number, I could click on that column. If I wanted to sort it by pay date, I could click on that column. And you see it's in chronological order by pay date. So if I want to put it in reverse chronological order, I just have to click on it one more time. System will remember that setting. At the bottom are several buttons, and before I click on the new button, I'm going to talk about the other buttons. Right now I'm highlighted on an open payroll, so if I click edit on it or double click on it to edit it, it'll take me into the payroll, and you'll see that I already have employees that are selected and pay that's been entered in for them, but it doesn't prohibit me from changing any of that. I can still change any of it before I post this pay run. So I'm going to click cancel. It'll take me back to the previous screen. If I go in to edit a posted pay run, you'll see that I can see everything, but it's all grayed out. So I can't make any changes on a posted pay run. Right now on the posted pay run, you can see that the delete button is grayed out. I can't delete a posted pay run. But if I highlight the open pay run, I can click delete and I can delete that open pay run, and if I need to start it over again, I can. As I highlight a pay run, on the bottom there is a copy button. So if when the new pay run that I'm trying to start, if it includes all of the same employees as a previous pay run, and if I want to even copy over their earnings, I can click the copy button. So when I click the copy button, I get two choices. If I say yes here to copy the earnings, it copies the employees and the earnings over. If I say no, it copies just the employees. So I'm going to say yes, and you'll see that it's going to create a new pay run with all of these employees already selected. And if I go to the Enter Pay tab, you see that their pay has been brought over from that previous pay run. The system recalculated their deductions, taxes, and benefits. I'm going to click Cancel on that. The other two buttons to the right, the first one, the unprocessed button, is something that you're not likely to use. The last button is the void checks button. The void checks button allows you to void checks out of a pay run. You do not need to highlight the pay run first. All you have to do is click the void checks button. Then you'll select from the drop-down box the pay run that you want to void checks out of. Click OK. It'll show you everybody that was paid in that pay run. And if you want to void all of the checks, you could just click Select All. Or you can select individual checks that you want to void out of that pay run. And if you need to reissue them, you could just do a new pay run for that same time period. I'm going to now click the New button to start a new pay run. You can see that starting a new pay run takes me to the Pay Employees tab, which has several sub-tabs, and they're numbered because that's the order that you need to go to those tabs in. The first tab is letting me select the employees that I want to pay in this pay run. So I need to select which company or fund those those employees are for. And if I want that to be my default when I come to this screen each time, I could right click and set it as the default. Then you're going to choose the bank account for that company or fund that you pay payroll out of. And usually that's the same one, so you can select it and then right click and set it as the default. It becomes the default bank account then for that company or fund for this screen. Each pay run is assigned a sequence number. It's in the format that you see on the screen. If you want to change the format of that sequence, you can right click and choose to edit it. Next, we're going to choose a frequency. When you set up all of your earnings and your deductions and benefits, you will assign a frequency to them. You will tell the system which pay periods during a month that earning or that deduction and benefit should be calculated on. Some deductions and benefits are not calculated in every pay period, and you might have different earnings that are only calculated in certain pay periods. So you're going to assign a schedule to those, and those schedules tell it what frequencies it should be calculated on. So you'll be able to select the frequency, and if you need to have a second frequency, there is a place there to select a second frequency. Then you're going to put in your work dates, so your from date and your to date, and then the pay date, or the date that the checks and pay advices should be dated. After that, we have a memo line, and you could put in a memo for this pay run. If you want that memo to print on your checks, there is a preference for that. Below the memo field are two check boxes. The first one is labeled Exclude Default Pay Amounts. When we generate a pay run that includes salary employees, it is automatically going to default their pay into the pay run so that you don't have to enter it in each time. However, let's say you were doing a bonus check and you didn't want their regular salary in there, you were just putting in bonuses, you would have to go through and zero out all those salaries unless you check this box here to exclude the default pay amounts. The second checkbox is for overtime. And there's two different overtimes in CenterPoint. One is for simple overtime and one is for calculated overtime. If you do not want it to calculate overtime, you can check the box right here. At the bottom left of the screen is a list of all of your active employees for this company or fund. If you want to filter that list further, there is the ability to filter it above. I can click on the plus sign and then I can say, I want to filter this for one of the items listed below. I'm going to choose payroll department, and I'm going to say I want to filter it for those that are in my stores department. If you want to pay the employee, you need to move them over to the right. So since I'm paying all of the employees in my store department, I'm going to move them over to the right. If I have any employees that had timesheets entered in, I would import the timesheet at this point. I do have an employee that has timesheets in it. The rest of them, I'm going to enter in their pay right on the pay run. I would encourage you to watch the video on timesheets, which goes into more information about importing timesheets. But I'm going to go ahead and import the timesheet. I don't want it to do a simple overtime calculation because I'm actually using a calculated overtime. So I'm just going to click import and then click OK. So once I've selected all of those items, I can move on to the next tab to enter in pay. The employees that you selected will be on the left-hand side. Now the columns that you see there are something that you can control. Right now I'm seeing the employee first name, last name, and then their net pay. But if I wanted to like add their abbreviation or their social security number or something there, I could right click and say I want to add remove columns and then add a column. So let's say I want to add employee abbreviation. I could also change instead of first name, last name, have it be last name, first name. I'm going to add employee abbreviation, move it to the top so that it's the first column and click OK. And then the system should remember that, and you can order them by whichever column you want just by clicking on the column heading. Right now I'm positioned on the first employee. And to move from an employee to employee, there's a couple of different ways. Obviously, you can use your mouse button and just click on the employee that you want to move to. Or if you're on an employee and you want to move to the next employee, you could click on the arrow key to the right. The double arrow key takes you to the last employee on the list. The double arrow key to the left takes you back to the first employee. As you're highlighted on an employee, to enter in their pay, you can hit tab and that'll move you over to the right-hand side to the details of their earnings. The number of weeks they've worked is going to default up at the top. If you need to change that, you can. And then you're going to move down to their earnings. Now, this particular one that I'm on was the one that I imported timesheets for. So you can see underneath timesheet earnings, it's showing my timesheet earnings, and it's showing each one of my timesheets that was imported. Okay, it's also showing the calculation of my overtime. So those things came in from my timesheet, but I can still enter in additional earnings for that person. I'm not for this particular person. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next employee, which happens to be a salary employee. My salary employee, oops, I'm not sure why that got collapsed to there. Oh, there we go. My salary employee has their salary already defaulted here. It did not default any hours for them. That is actually a preference. If you want it to default hours, you can set that preference. Okay, if I have any kind of an earning on an employee that's salary that is not calculated by hours times a rate or a number of pieces times a rate, I can go directly to the rate field to enter it in. So if this person's getting a $50 bonus, I could type in 50 right into the rate field, and then that becomes the amount. If this person has any paid time off and you're accruing their time off, you're going to see how much they've accrued down in the bottom left. And if I enter in any hours for them on their paid time off earning, it will deduct from those available when the pay run is posted. So now it's saying that I have 8 that were used during this pay period. Since it's a salary employee, we don't give them any additional money for that, but if it was an hourly employee, we would. Okay, if I move down to a hourly employee. By the way, there is another way to move down. If you're more keyboard oriented, you can use the Alt and the right arrow key to move down to the next employee too. So that is another way to move down to the next employee. If I go to the next employee that needs to have time entered, Della Sapp, she's an hourly employee. So if I tab over to her earnings, if she has any commissions, I could go directly to the rate field. So I can put in her commissions. And then if I come down to the hourly field, since I am using calculated overtime, when I'm putting in her hours, I want to make sure that I'm selecting the right overtime period. Since I'm only paying weekly, I only have one overtime period, but if I was biweekly, I might have more than one. I'm going to put in the number of hours that she worked times the rate of pay, and the system's going to calculate her amount. For each one of these lines of entry for these employees, there is some details that might be added to each earning. Okay, those details can be found on the detail button. When I set up this employee, I set them up with a default department of the store. So for each earning, we're recording that it was for the store department. Okay, I also set up a default profit center and a location for this employee. So those are items that are getting recorded with each earning that I put in for that employee. Okay. If I needed to change any of those, like let's see this person worked in a different department, maybe a different profit center, I would need to go to the details button and then change those. Since that can be kind of cumbersome, we give you the option of adding those as columns rather than going to the detail button. So if I want to add any columns, I could right click, go to add remove columns, and then I could add the columns I want. I just want to make a note that if you have people who are making a piece rate, pieces is one of the columns you might add. I'm going to add this column called pay defaults, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I also want to add a column for project, department, and profit center and location, because those are things that change a lot for my employees. I'm going to use this button to move them up with the other selected columns. Then I'm going to move them around a little bit. I'm going to move pay default to right next to my earning. And then I'm going to just reorganize these just a little bit. I'm going to move department before work comp class. I'm actually going to take off work comp class. I'm going to then make it be location. I'm going to make it be department, profit center, location, and then project, and I'm going to click OK. So now those are columns over to the right-hand side, and it makes it easy to change them when I want to. Well, how do I add another line of entry so that I can put in another earning with different details? All I have to do is go to a blank line, choose that, and that same earning again, and now it's going to default those same details in because those were my default details for that employee. But I'm going to put in that they had 36 hours, and those 36 hours were spent in the department of tours and lessons in the profit center of bike tours and for the Colorado store still, but it was working on my Argentina tour. Okay, so it allowed me to make those changes. So you can have multiple lines, but again, if you have more than one overtime period, you want to make sure that you select the right overtime period. Okay, so I'm going to go to my next employee, Jeannie, Joanna Spruce, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about this pay default. So Joanna has 10 hours that she spent, and it was different than her default. She spent it in tours and lessons, and it was for a bike tour that was for the Colorado store, or the Minnesota store, but it was the Costa Rica tour. Okay, those things happen a lot. Those were 3 pieces of information that I had to change every time she's working on the Costa Rica tour. So you can use something called a pay default if you want to change those items a little quicker. So I'm just going to add another line that is going to be for the Costa Rica tour again, and I'm going to select something called a pay default. I set up a pay default for it. There is a separate video on setting up pay defaults, but pay defaults let us group those things together. So now all I have to do is select the pay default of Costa Rica, and it went ahead and it changed all of the pieces of information for me. So I didn't have to go change those individual fields. Now all I have to do is put in the number of hours that she worked. Okay. So obviously she worked 52 hours this period, and it did calculate my overtime. If you're using calculated overtime, this is how it would look. The reason why I wanted to show you that is you notice down at the bottom that the overtime also has those details. So if I need to change any of that information for the overtime, such as tours and lessons, or the Costa Rica tour here, that she was in the profit center of bike tours, and any other information I need to change, I could add those columns here and make those changes there for the overtime earnings. Below all of the earnings is where you're going to see all of your deductions, your benefits, and employee and employer taxes get calculated. A quick way to expand those out would be to go to options and say expand pay, and it's going to expand everything out. If you go to options and you choose to collapse pay, it just collapses the deductions and benefits and taxes, but not the earnings. If you see anything down here that didn't get calculated correctly or that you need to change, you can go ahead and type it in and it'll mark it as overridden. Typically, a deduction or a benefit or taxes will get recalculated with each earning that you put in. So if I open this up for employee taxes here, right now the federal withholding is $30.08. If I come up here to commissions and put in that they got $125 in commissions, oops, I put that in the hours, $125 in commissions, I'm going to zero out the hours. It changed their taxes. Okay, before it was $30.08, now it's $81.88. But notice that the 401k did not get changed because I had overridden it. So it doesn't get changed again with any new earnings that you enter above. Couple other quick things about this screen. Down at the options button, we already saw the expand and collapse pay. Typically, like I just said, if you type in a new earning, it recalculates all of the deductions, benefits, and employer taxes. If you don't want it to calculate those every time you make a change to an earning, there's a couple different calculation methods. The first one selected is what it does by default. If you want it to not do that recalculation until you move on to a new employee, you could select the middle button. And the third button would say that it's not going to do any of that recalculation until you physically hit the calculate button. So those are two other options. Now, I didn't have an employee that I was going to do this for, but if you wanted to take and copy or recall an employee's earnings from a previous pay run, you could highlight the employee, click recall, choose the pay run that you paid them on that you want to recall their earnings from, and click OK, and it'll bring over their earnings from that previous pay run. Okay. Once you're done entering in all of the earnings here, you're ready to move on to the special adjustment screen. There are a number of special adjustments that can be done here, and there are separate videos on each one of these special adjustments. So we'll just briefly talk about them. One is an hourly rate rounding adjustment. The next one is a minimum wage adjustment for those of you who have piece rate workers. You need to at least pay them minimum wage, and for tips. Pay employee FICA adjustment is for employers who are paying the employees portion of FICA and Medicare for them. We need to round up their pay and have it come out so that it can get calculated and show up correctly on all of the reports. So that would be an adjustment for that. There is a break pay adjustment in some states. If you have piece rate workers, you also need to pay them for a break every so many hours. So that is the adjustment that can be done here. If you make any adjustments, if you don't need to make any adjustments, you don't ever need to come to this tab. So this is only for those people that need those adjustments. The next tab is the totals tab, and there's really nothing to do on this tab. It's just an informational tab showing you basically what this pay run's going to cost. It's good information if you need to transfer money from another bank account to your payroll account. It kind of gives you an idea of the amount of money that you need to transfer. Now, you can't print this out, but there are reports that you can print similar information from, and those are going to be found on the next tab, which is the prepayment reports tab. These are all reports that can be printed on a pay run prior to it being posted. Many of them can be run on the pay run after it's already posted as well. Some of them can only be run prior to it being posted. Now, there's a separate video on payroll reports that'll go into more detail on these reports, but as I highlight one of these reports, you can see that it is already filtered for the current pay run that I'm working on. So if you preview those reports, it's going to be just on this particular pay run. It's information for just this pay run. So this one is a common one. It's an employee prepayment detail that gives you like a little stub almost for each employee, showing you what their earnings, deductions, and benefits were. And then at the end, the information for the entire pay run. Okay, you can add, remove columns and reformat these. That's all discussed in the video on payroll reports. Once you're done with all of your payroll reports, you're ready to print your checks. So you would move on to the Print Checks tab, where you would print your checks and payroll advices, as well as you may be calculating or accruing more leave, and you might be creating a direct deposit file from this screen. So all of that activity is discussed in the video on printing and posting payroll checks. So you'll want to view that video for the information on this particular screen.